The fluorescent lights of St. Michael's Hospital hummed overhead as Harold Jenkins lay in room 412, watching the autumn rain streak down the window. At 68 years old, he had driven over 3 million miles across America, seen every state, weathered every storm. But this was one road he could not navigate alone. The cancer had started in his lungs, the doctor said. Probably from decades of diesel fumes and truck stop cigarettes. It had spread to his liver, then his bones. They gave him weeks, maybe a month if he was lucky. Harold had never felt lucky, not really. But he had felt blessed once, 18 years ago, on a stretch of highway outside of Memphis. His room was sparse but comfortable, filled with the quiet beeping of monitors and the distant murmur of hospital activity. Cards from well-wishers lined the windowsill, most from fellow truckers he had known over the years. A small television mounted on the wall played the news with the volume turned low, but Harold was not watching. His eyes were fixed on the rain, on the patterns it made as it slid down the glass, each droplet following its own unpredictable path. He thought about all the roads he had traveled, all the loads he had hauled, all the sunrises he had witnessed from behind the wheel of his truck. 3 million miles, that was a lot of road, a lot of time away from home, away from Mabel and the kids. He had missed so much over the years. Baseball games and piano recitals and first dates and graduations. He had been there for some of them, but not enough. Never enough. Mabel had never complained, not once. She understood that trucking was not just a job, but a calling, a way of life that got into your blood and would not let go. She had raised their 3 children mostly on her own, handling the day-to-day responsibilities while Harold was out on the road, keeping the household running with quiet strength and unwavering love. He owed her everything, more than he could ever repay. And now, at the end, he found himself wishing he had told her more often. Told her how grateful he was, how much he loved her, how she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. A nurse named Patricia entered the room, her soft-soled shoes barely making a sound on the linoleum floor. She checked his IV, adjusted his pillows, and offered him the same gentle smile she gave all her patients. "How are we doing today, Mr. Jenkins?" she asked. Harold managed a weak smile in return. "Still here," he said. "That's something, I suppose. It certainly is." She paused, studying his chart. "Is there anything I can get you? Anything at all?" Harold was quiet for a moment, his weathered hands folded across his chest. There was something, actually, someone he wanted to see before the end. But he did not know how to ask, did not even know if it was possible. "There's a girl," he said slowly. "Well, she'd be a woman now, 23 years old, if my math is right. I saved her life once, a long time ago, on the highway just outside Memphis. I always wondered what happened to her, if she turned out okay." Patricia's expression softened. "Do you know her name?" Harold shook his head. "I never knew. It all happened so fast. Her mama didn't make it, but the little girl, she survived. Because of me, they said. But I never saw her again after that night. Never knew if she remembered, or if she even knew what I did." Patricia reached out and patted his hand gently. "That's a beautiful thing you did, Mr. Jenkins. Saving a child's life. That matters more than you know." Harold's eyes grew distant, lost in memory. "I think about her every day," he admitted. "Especially now at the end. I'd like to know she's okay, that it meant something." Patricia was quiet for a moment, then nodded decisively. "Let me see what I can do," she said. "I can't promise anything, but I'll try." After she left, Harold closed his eyes and let the memories wash over him. 18 years. It felt like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. The night it happened had been cold and rainy, much like tonight. Harold had been hauling a load of auto parts from Little Rock to Nashville, running behind schedule because of a mechanical issue at the last truck stop. The brake light on his trailer had been flickering, and he had spent 2 hours waiting for a mechanic to fix it. He had been tired, bone tired, the kind of exhaustion that seeped into your marrow and made every mile feel like 10. The CB radio had been alive with chatter that night, truckers warning each other about the weather and the road conditions. Someone had mentioned an accident up ahead, a multi-car pileup near the Arkansas-Tennessee border. Harold had considered pulling over and waiting it out, but something had pushed him forward. A feeling, maybe. An instinct that he needed to be somewhere else. But he had pushed on, because that was what truckers did. The load had to be delivered. The bills had to be paid. His wife, Mabel, was waiting at home, and he had promised her he would be there for their anniversary, 30 years of marriage, and he was not about to miss it. He had called her from a rest stop around midnight just to hear her voice. She had sounded sleepy, but happy, reminding him to be careful and telling him she loved him. He had said he loved her too, and that he would see her soon. Those words, so simple and so ordinary, had taken on a new weight in the years since. He never knew what moment might be the last, what words might be the final ones spoken between two people who loved each other. The rain had been coming down in sheets, reducing visibility to almost nothing. Harold had slowed the big rig to a crawl, his eyes straining to see the road ahead. Other vehicles had pulled over to wait out the storm, but Harold kept going. He knew these roads, knew every curve and dip, could drive them in his sleep if he had to. The darkness was total, broken only by the sweep of his headlights and the occasional flash of lightning in the distance. The windshield wipers beat a frantic rhythm, struggling to keep up with the deluge. Harold gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white, his entire being focused on the task of keeping the truck on the road. That was when he saw it. A flash of light, a screech of tires, and then a minivan spinning out of control, hydroplaning across the wet asphalt like a toy on ice. It slammed into the guardrail, flipped twice, and came to rest on its roof in the median, smoke rising from the crumpled hood. Time seemed to slow down in that moment. Harold watched the accident unfold with a clarity that would haunt him for years afterward. He saw the minivan's headlights sweeping wildly across the darkness, saw the sparks flying as metal met metal, saw the vehicle come to rest in a position that no vehicle should ever be in. His training kicked in automatically. He pumped the brakes gently, avoiding the temptation to slam them in the wet conditions. He steered toward the shoulder, his truck responding with the smooth precision of a well-maintained machine. He set the parking brake, activated his hazard lights, and grabbed his flashlight from the holder on the dashboard. The rain hit him like a physical blow when he opened the door. Cold and driving, it soaked through his jacket in seconds, but he barely noticed. All his attention was focused on the overturned minivan, on the smoke that was beginning to thicken, on the flames that were starting to appear beneath the crumpled hood. Harold reacted on instinct. He pulled the truck to the shoulder, grabbed his flashlight, and ran toward the wreckage. The rain pelted his face, cold and stinging, but he barely noticed. All he could see was the overturned vehicle, the shattered glass, the flames beginning to lick at the undercarriage. The ground was slick with rain and oil, and Harold nearly fell twice as he crossed the median. His work boots, designed for the cab of a truck rather than rescue operations, struggled to find purchase on the wet grass. But he kept going, driven by an urgency that transcended thought. Other vehicles were stopping now, their headlights creating a halo of light around the accident scene. Someone was shouting something about calling 911, but Harold knew that emergency services might not arrive in time, not with the way those flames were spreading. He reached the minivan and dropped to his knees, shining the flashlight through the broken window. Inside, he could see a woman in the driver's seat, unconscious and bleeding heavily from a wound on her head. Her airbag had deployed, but she was hanging upside down from her seatbelt, her arms dangling limply toward the roof that was now the floor. And in the back seat, strapped into a car seat that had somehow remained intact, was a little girl, 5 years old, maybe 6. Her eyes were wide with terror, tears streaming down her cheeks, but she was alive. She was alive. The little girl's mouth was moving, and Harold realized she was calling for her mother. Her small voice cut through the chaos of the storm, a plaintive cry that broke his heart. "Mama! Mama! Wake up! Mama! Please!" Harold's throat tightened with emotion, but he forced himself to focus. There would be time for grief later. Right now, his only job was to get this child out of the burning vehicle. The flames were spreading, and Harold knew he had seconds, not minutes. He tried the driver's door, but it was jammed shut. The passenger door would not budge either, so he crawled through the shattered back window, ignoring the glass that cut his hands and arms, and made his way to the little girl. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said, trying to keep his voice calm, even as panic clawed at his chest. "I'm going to get you out of here, just hold on." The car seat buckle was stuck, the mechanism bent from the impact. Harold pulled out his pocket knife and cut through the straps, freeing the child. He gathered her in his arms and crawled back out through the window, shielding her body with his own as he put distance between them and the burning vehicle. They had barely made it 10 feet when the gas tank exploded, sending a fireball into the night sky. Harold threw himself over the little girl, protecting her from the heat and debris. The force of the explosion pushed them both to the ground, and for a moment, Harold thought they might not survive, but they did survive. When the initial blast subsided, Harold looked up to see the minivan completely engulfed in flames, a roaring inferno that illuminated the entire scene with hellish light. The heat was intense even from this distance, and he knew with sickening certainty that the woman inside had not survived. He gathered the little girl in his arms and carried her further from the wreckage, his body shielding her from the sight of the burning vehicle. She was shaking uncontrollably, her small hands gripping his jacket with desperate strength. "It's okay, sweetheart," he told her, his voice surprisingly steady despite the trembling in his own limbs. "You're safe now. I've got you." Other people were arriving now, other drivers who had stopped to help. A woman in a nurse's uniform took charge of the scene, directing traffic and checking Harold and the little girl for injuries. Someone had found a blanket in their car, and Harold wrapped it around the child, trying to warm her. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked her gently. The little girl did not answer. Her eyes were fixed on the burning minivan, on the place where her mother still was. Harold positioned himself to block her view, knowing that she had already seen too much. "My name is Harold," he told her. "Can you tell me your name?" "Lily," the little girl whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the fire and the rain. "My name is Lily." "That's a beautiful name," Harold said, managing a smile despite the circumstances. "Everything's going to be okay, Lily, I promise." The little girl clung to him, sobbing into his shirt, and Harold held her close, rocking her gently as the rain continued to fall. He stayed with her until the ambulances arrived, until the paramedics took her away, until the police took his statement and thanked him for his bravery. The fire department arrived and began the grim task of extinguishing the blaze. The police set up a perimeter, redirecting traffic away from the scene. Emergency lights painted the highway in alternating shades of red and blue, creating a surreal tableau of destruction and rescue. Harold answered questions on autopilot, his mind still focused on the little girl, on Lily. He gave his name and contact information, described what he had witnessed, explained the actions he had taken. The officers were respectful and professional, but he could see the grim reality in their eyes. They knew, as he knew, that this was a tragedy, that a child had lost her mother tonight, but he never learned her last name. In the chaos of that night, with the flashing lights and the shouting and the grief, no one thought to tell him. And by the time he thought to ask, she was already gone, whisked away to a hospital and then, presumably, to whatever family she had left. Harold had thought about her often over the years. On long hauls through the night, when the road stretched endlessly before him, he would wonder where she was, what she was doing, if she ever thought about the man who had pulled her from the flames. He had clipped the newspaper article about the accident and kept it in his wallet, a faded reminder of the night that had changed everything. The article had described the accident in clinical terms, as newspapers always did. Single vehicle accident on Interstate 40. One fatality, one survivor. The victim was identified as Jennifer Chen, age 32, a piano teacher from Nashville. Her daughter, age 5, was rescued from the vehicle by a passing motorist and transported to the hospital with minor injuries. That was all. No follow-up stories, no updates on what had happened to the little girl. She had simply disappeared into the system, absorbed by the vast machinery of social services and family courts and foster care. Harold had tried to find her once or twice, but he did not know where to begin. He did not even know her last name until he read the article, and by then it was too late. The trail had gone cold. Over the years, he had created stories in his mind about what had happened to her. Sometimes she was adopted by a loving family and grew up happy and healthy. Sometimes she struggled, haunted by the trauma of that night, never quite finding her footing. Sometimes she became a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher, using her second chance at life to help others. He hoped for the best, always. He hoped that she had found happiness, that she had been loved, that the nightmare of that rainy highway had faded into a distant memory, replaced by better things. Now, lying in this hospital bed with his life measured in days, he found himself thinking about her more than ever. He did not need thanks. He did not need recognition. He just needed to know that she was okay, that the sacrifice had been worth it, that something good had come from something so terrible. The thought consumed him in a way that surprised even himself. He had done many things in his life, some good and some not so good. He had been a husband and a father and a provider. He had worked hard and played by the rules and tried to be a decent man. But nothing he had ever done felt as important as what he had done that night on the highway. Saving that little girl was the defining moment of his life. And now, at the end, he needed to know that it had mattered. Patricia returned an hour later, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Jenkins," she said quietly, "I made some calls, found someone who might be able to help track down information about the accident. It's a long shot, but..." Harold's eyes lit up with hope. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for trying." "Don't thank me yet," Patricia replied. "But I'll do everything I can." She sat down in the chair beside his bed, her professional demeanor softening into something more personal. "I have to tell you, Mr. Jenkins, what you did that night was extraordinary. Most people would have kept driving. Most people would have told themselves it wasn't their problem, that someone else would handle it. But you stopped. You risked your life for a stranger. That takes a special kind of courage." Harold shook his head weakly. "I didn't think about it. I just saw that little girl, and I knew I had to try." "That's exactly what I mean," Patricia said. "That kind of instinct, that automatic response to help someone in need. That's not something everyone has. You should be proud of yourself." "I'll be proud of myself if we find her," Harold replied. "If I can know that she's okay." Patricia nodded, determination setting in her features. "Then we'll find her. I promise." The days that followed were a blur of treatments and tests, of visitors and phone calls, of the slow, steady decline that Harold had been warned about. His body was failing, but his mind remained sharp, clinging to the hope that he might see the little girl one more time before the end. Patricia worked tirelessly on his behalf, spending her breaks and her off hours making calls and sending emails. She contacted the Memphis Police Department and obtained a copy of the accident report. She reached out to local newspapers, hoping someone might remember the story. She posted on social media, asking anyone with information to come forward. The response was overwhelming. The story of the dying trucker and the little girl he had saved captured the hearts of thousands. People shared the posts, offered prayers and well wishes, and volunteered to help in any way they could. But the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A retired social worker in Nashville, who had handled Lily's case after the accident, saw one of Patricia's posts and reached out. She remembered the little girl, remembered the tragedy and the trauma and the difficult months that followed, and she knew what had happened to her. Mabel came every day, sitting by his bedside and holding his hand the way she had for 48 years of marriage. She was 70 now, her hair silver and her face lined with the marks of a life well lived. But to Harold, she was still the beautiful young woman he had married in that little church in Tennessee. They had met at a church social in 1976, two young people barely out of their teens, both shy and awkward and utterly smitten with each other. Harold had been working as a mechanic at his father's garage, dreaming of something bigger but not sure what. Mabel had been a cashier at the local grocery store, saving money for college and hoping for a future that seemed impossibly far away. They had talked for hours that first night, discovering shared interests and complementary dreams. By the end of the evening, Harold knew that he had found something special, someone special, someone he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. They married a year later in a simple ceremony attended by family and friends. Harold's father had given him a job driving the delivery truck for the garage, and that had been the beginning of his trucking career. One job led to another, 1 mile to the next, until suddenly he was a long-haul trucker with his own rig and a reputation for reliability. Mabel had supported him through it all, through the lean years and the prosperous ones, through the birth of their 3 children and the challenges of raising them, through the long nights alone and the joyful reunions when he came home. She was his rock, his anchor, his reason for everything. "You're still thinking about her," Mabel said one afternoon. "The little girl." Harold nodded. "I can't help it, knowing I did something that mattered, that I saved a life. It makes all those years on the road seem worth it, you know." Mabel squeezed his hand. "Everything you did mattered, Harold. Every load you hauled, every mile you drove. You provided for our family. You gave our children a good life. You were a good man." "I tried to be," Harold said, "but saving that little girl, that was the best thing I ever did. I just wish I knew what became of her." "Maybe you will," Mabel said softly. "Miracles happen, Harold, even in hospitals." A week passed and Harold grew weaker. He slept more, ate less, spoke in whispers when he spoke at all. The doctors adjusted his medications, making him comfortable, preparing for what they knew was coming. The autumn leaves outside his window had begun to fall, drifting past the glass like nature's farewell. Harold watched them sometimes, thinking about all the autumns he had seen from the cab of his truck, the changing colors along the Blue Ridge Parkway, the golden aspens of Colorado, the brilliant maples of New England. He had been blessed to witness so much beauty in his life, even if he had not always appreciated it at the time. His children took turns sitting with him, sharing memories and stories, filling the room with laughter even as their hearts were breaking. Harold Jr. told him about the time they had gone fishing together, and Harold had fallen into the lake trying to catch a bass. Sarah reminded him of the father-daughter dance when she was 12, how he had stepped on her feet the entire time, but she had never felt more loved. Michael talked about learning to drive in the old pickup truck, how Harold had patiently taught him to work the clutch even after he stalled it a dozen times. These memories were treasures, Harold realized. More valuable than any load he had ever hauled, any paycheck he had ever earned. This was what life was really about. Not the miles or the money, but the moments, the connections, the love that bound people together across time and distance. Patricia had not given up. She had contacted local newspapers, reached out to the Memphis Police Department, even posted on social media asking for information about the accident. The response had been overwhelming, with hundreds of people sharing the story and offering to help. The hospital had become invested in the search too. Other nurses and doctors spread the word among their own networks. The cafeteria staff talked about it during their breaks. Even patients in other rooms heard the story and offered prayers for a successful reunion. And then, on a Tuesday afternoon, Patricia walked into Harold's room with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Jenkins," she said, her voice trembling, "I found her." Harold's eyes opened, sudden clarity cutting through the fog of medication. "You found her?" Patricia nodded, pulling out her phone and showing him a picture. Her name is Lily Chen. She's 23 years old now, just like you said. She lives in Nashville. She's a nurse, Mr. Jenkins, a pediatric nurse at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. Harold stared at the picture, at the young woman with dark hair and kind eyes, and felt tears sliding down his cheeks. "She became a nurse," he whispered. "She helps children." "She does," Patricia confirmed, "and Mr. Jenkins, she wants to come see you." When I reached out to her, she broke down crying. She said she's been looking for you her whole life. She never forgot the man who saved her. She's been searching for years, but she didn't know your name. Harold's heart swelled with emotion. She remembered everything. She said she can still hear your voice, telling her it was going to be okay. She said that voice saved her life, not just that night, but every night since. Whenever things got hard, she would hear you saying those words, and she would find the strength to keep going. Harold closed his eyes, overwhelmed. "When?" he asked. "When can she come?" "She's already on her way," Patricia said. "She left Nashville this morning. She should be here by evening." The hours that followed were the longest of Harold's life. He drifted in and out of consciousness, dreams and memories blending together until he could not tell where one ended and the other began. He saw the burning minivan, felt the rain on his face, heard the little girl's cries. And then he saw her face, not as she was then, but as she was now. A woman, a nurse, a life saved and lived to its fullest. Mabel stayed by his side, holding his hand and whispering words of encouragement. Their children came too, Harold Jr. and Sarah and Michael, all grown now with families of their own. They gathered around his bed, a circle of love and support, waiting for the arrival of a stranger who was somehow already family. The sun was setting when the door to room 412 opened one final time, and there she was. Lily Chen stood in the doorway, her hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She was beautiful, Harold thought. Beautiful and alive, and everything he had hoped she would become. She had her mother's dark hair and kind eyes, the same delicate features he remembered from that night on the highway. But there was a strength in her now, a confidence that came from surviving the worst and emerging whole. She was wearing scrubs, Harold noticed, the uniform of a nurse. Even in this moment, she had come straight from work, unwilling to waste a single minute that could be spent with him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other, bridging 18 years of separation with a single glance. Harold felt tears sliding down his own cheeks, but he made no move to wipe them away. This was a moment for tears. A moment for letting go of everything he had been holding on to for so long. The room was silent, except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor and the soft hum of the medical equipment. Harold's family had stepped back, giving them space, understanding that this reunion was something sacred, something that belonged only to the two people who had shared that terrible, miraculous night. Then Lily walked forward slowly at first, then faster, until she was at Harold's bedside, taking his weathered hand in both of hers. Her hands were soft and warm, the hands of a healer, and Harold felt a sense of peace wash over him at her touch. "It's you," she whispered. "After all these years, it's really you." Harold smiled, the same gentle smile he had given her on that rainy highway so long ago. "Hello, sweetheart," he said. "I'm so glad you're okay." Lily laughed through her tears, a sound that was both joy and grief mingled together. "Okay? I'm more than okay. I'm alive because of you. Everything I am, everything I've become, it's all because you stopped that night. You could have kept driving. Anyone else would have kept driving, but you stopped. You saved me." "I had to," Harold said simply. "I saw that little girl, and I knew I had to try." Lily shook her head, still gripping his hand. "You didn't just try. You succeeded. And you gave me a gift that I can never repay. You gave me my life." She pulled a chair closer to his bed and sat down, never letting go of his hand. Her eyes were fixed on his face, memorizing every line and wrinkle, every mark of a life well lived. This was the man who had saved her. This was the voice she had carried in her heart for 18 years. And now, finally, she could put a face to the hero she had never forgotten. They talked for hours, filling in the gaps of 18 years. Lily told Harold about her childhood, about being raised by her grandmother after her mother's death, about the years of therapy and healing that had eventually led her to nursing school. She told him about the patients she had helped, the children she had comforted, the lives she had touched. Her grandmother had been a remarkable woman, Lily explained. A retired school teacher with a gentle spirit and an iron will, she had taken in her grieving granddaughter without hesitation. She had held Lily through the nightmares, had answered the impossible questions about why Mommy was not coming home, had provided a stable foundation from which a broken child could slowly, painstakingly rebuild. The first year was the hardest, Lily said. I didn't speak for 3 months after the accident. Not a word. The therapists called it selective mutism. My grandmother just called it grief. She would sit with me for hours, reading books and singing songs, and never once pressuring me to speak. And one day, I just started talking again. I don't even remember deciding to. The words just came. Harold listened, his heart aching for the little girl who had suffered so much, but she had survived. She had done more than survive. She had thrived. What made you become a nurse? He asked. Lily smiled, a soft expression that transformed her face. You, she said simply. That night on the highway, when you pulled me from the car and held me in the rain, you told me everything was going to be okay. And somehow, even though nothing was okay, I believed you. Your voice, your presence, the way you held me like I was the most precious thing in the world, it gave me hope. It made me believe that there were good people out there, people who would stop and help when others would look away. She paused, collecting herself. When I started thinking about what I wanted to do with my life, I kept coming back to that moment. I wanted to be the kind of person who made others feel safe, who gave them hope when everything seemed hopeless, who held their hand and told them everything was going to be okay. I became a nurse because of you, she said, because of what you did that night. I wanted to help people the way you helped me. I wanted to be someone's miracle the way you were mine. Harold listened, his eyes never leaving her face, his heart fuller than it had ever been. You are, he said. I know you are. Lily told him about her work at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital, about the children she had treated and the families she had supported. She had specialized in pediatric oncology, working with children who were fighting the same kind of battle that Harold was now losing. She knew what it meant to face death, to confront mortality, to find hope in the midst of despair. There was a little boy, she said, her eyes growing distant with memory. His name was Jacob. He was 6 years old, the same age I was when you saved me. He had leukemia, and the prognosis was not good. His parents were devastated, barely holding themselves together, and one night when things looked especially grim, I sat with him and told him the story of the trucker who had saved me. What happened? Harold asked. Jacob looked at me with these big, serious eyes, and he said, maybe I'll be saved too. And you know what? He was. He went into remission 3 weeks later. He's 13 now, healthy and happy, and he wants to be a firefighter when he grows up. He wants to save people, just like you saved me. Harold felt tears sliding down his cheeks again. That's beautiful, he whispered. That's your legacy, Lily replied. That's what you started that night on the highway. You didn't just save one life, Mr. Jenkins. You saved countless lives. Every child I've ever comforted, every family I've ever helped, it all traces back to you, to that moment when you chose to stop. As the night wore on, Harold's family drifted in and out, giving him space to talk with Lily but never straying far. They understood somehow that this meeting was the culmination of a journey that had begun long before any of them were born. A journey of fate and chance, and the mysterious ways that lives intersected and influenced each other. Harold Jr., the eldest of Harold's children, approached Lily at one point. He was 50 years old now, with grey at his temples and his father's kind eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Dad's been waiting for this for so long. We didn't know if we'd ever find you." Lily took his hand warmly. "I've been waiting too," she replied. "My whole life I've been waiting for this moment. I just didn't know it until I got the call." Sarah, the middle child, hugged Lily like a long-lost sister. "You're part of our family now," she said firmly. "Whatever happens, you're one of us." And Michael, the youngest, who had inherited his father's love of the road, simply nodded with respect. "Dad always said that night was the most important moment of his life," he told Lily. "Now I understand why." Mabel approached Lily at one point, embracing her like a daughter. "Thank you for coming," she said. "He's been waiting for this for so long." Lily hugged her back. "I've been waiting too," she replied. "I just didn't know I was waiting until I got the call." Around midnight, Harold's breathing began to change. The doctors had warned the family that this might happen, that the end could come quickly once it began. They gathered around his bed, hands clasped, tears flowing freely. The room was quiet now, the bustle of the hospital fading into the background. Only the soft beeping of the monitors and the gentle hum of the oxygen machine broke the silence. Outside the window, the rain had finally stopped, leaving the world washed clean and glistening under the streetlights. But Harold was not afraid. Looking around at the faces of everyone he loved, and at Lily, the little girl who had become a woman, he felt only peace. His life had not been perfect. He had made mistakes, had regrets, had moments of doubt and despair. But in the end, he had done something that mattered. He had made a difference. "I think it's time," he said softly. "I can feel it." Lily leaned closer, her tears falling onto his hand. "Is there anything I can do? Anything at all?" Harold smiled. "You already did it, sweetheart. You came. You let me see that you're okay. That's all I ever wanted. But I want to do more," Lily insisted. "I want to give you something, the way you gave to me." Harold considered this, his mind drifting to the things that mattered most. "There is one thing," he said finally. "Anything. Tell me about your mother. Tell me about the woman I couldn't save." Lily's breath caught, but she nodded. The request was unexpected, but somehow it felt right. Harold had carried the weight of that night for 18 years. He had celebrated the life he had saved, but he had also mourned the life he could not save. He deserved to know who Jennifer Chen had been. "My mother's name was Jennifer," she began, her voice soft but steady. "Jennifer Chen. She was a piano teacher. She had the most beautiful voice you've ever heard, and she used to sing to me every night before bed. She was brave and kind, and she loved me more than anything in the world. She was 32 when she died. So young. She had so much life left to live, so many dreams still unfulfilled. She had wanted to open her own music school one day, a place where children could learn to play and sing and express themselves through music. She had wanted to travel the world, to see Paris and Tokyo, and all the places she had only read about in books. She had wanted to watch me grow up, to see me graduate and get married and have children of my own. None of that would happen now. But her spirit lived on, in the music that still played in Lily's heart, in the kindness that still guided her actions, in the love that still connected them across the boundary of death. "She sounds wonderful," Harold said. She was. And that night, the night of the accident, we were driving home from my grandmother's house. It was my birthday, and we had celebrated with cake and presents and singing. I was so happy, Mr. Jenkins, so happy and so tired. I fell asleep in my car seat, and the next thing I knew, you were there, cutting me free, carrying me through the rain. Harold nodded, remembering. "I'm sorry I couldn't save her too." Lily shook her head fiercely. "Don't apologize. You did everything you could. My grandmother always told me that my mother died so I could live, that she would have wanted it that way, and I believe that. I believe that somewhere, somehow, she knows what you did for me, and she's grateful." Harold felt tears sliding down his cheeks again. "I think about her sometimes," he admitted, "the woman I couldn't reach. I wonder if she was afraid, if she knew what was happening. Lily was quiet for a moment, then reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph. "This is her," she said, showing it to Harold. "This is my mother." Harold looked at the picture, at the young woman with dark hair and a bright smile, and felt something shift in his chest. "She was beautiful," he said. "She was, and she would have loved you, Mr. Jenkins. She would have hugged you and thanked you, and probably made you sit down for a home-cooked meal, whether you wanted to or not." Harold chuckled weakly. "That sounds nice. It would have been. But since she can't be here, I'll thank you for both of us. Thank you for stopping. Thank you for risking your life. Thank you for being the kind of person who runs toward danger instead of away from it. Thank you for giving me a chance to grow up, to fall in love, to have a career, to become who I was meant to be." Harold reached up and touched her face, his hand trembling but gentle. "You make it all worth it," he said. "Every mile I ever drove, every storm I ever weathered, every night I spent away from my family. It was all worth it, because it led me to that moment on the highway. The moment I found you." Lily pressed her face into his palm, tears flowing freely. "I love you, Mr. Jenkins," she whispered. "I know we've only just met, but I love you. I've loved you my whole life." Harold's eyes glistened. "I love you too, sweetheart. I always have. Even when I didn't know your name or where you were or if you were okay. Some part of me always loved you." They stayed like that for a long moment, connected across years and miles and circumstances, two souls who had been brought together by tragedy and were now saying goodbye in the most beautiful way possible. Then Lily pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I want to do something," she said, "something to honor you, something to make sure that what you did is never forgotten." Harold shook his head. "You don't have to do anything. Just live your life, be happy, help people. That's enough." But Lily was insistent. "It's not enough. Not for what you gave me. I want to do more." She turned to Harold's family, who had been standing nearby, listening with tears in their eyes. "I have an idea," Lily said, "but I'll need your help." The next morning, the hospital was buzzing with activity. Word had spread about the trucker in room 412 and the little girl he had saved 18 years ago. Nurses and doctors and orderlies found excuses to walk past his door, to peek inside and catch a glimpse of the reunion that had captured everyone's heart. Lily had been busy all night, making phone calls and sending messages and coordinating what she insisted on calling a small gesture of gratitude. But there was nothing small about what she had planned. At 10 o'clock, a procession began to form outside the hospital. First came the truckers, dozens of them, their big rigs gleaming in the morning sun. They had driven through the night from all over the country, answering a call that had gone out on CB radio and social media, spreading from trucker to trucker like wildfire. "Harold Jenkins is dying," the message had said. "The hero who saved a little girl from a burning car 18 years ago is in the hospital, and he's running out of time. Let's show him what his brotherhood thinks of him. They came from Tennessee and Texas and California and Maine. They came in Peterbilts and Kenworths and Freightliners, their chrome polished and their air horns ready. They filled the hospital parking lot and spilled out onto the surrounding streets, a convoy of solidarity and respect. Each truck was decorated differently. Some had banners that read, 'Thank you, Harold,' or 'Truckers Salute a Hero.' Others had American flags flying from their antennas or ribbons tied to their mirrors. One driver had even painted a mural on his trailer, depicting a man carrying a child through flames, with the words, 'Real heroes drive trucks,' written below. The truckers gathered in small groups, sharing coffee from thermoses and stories about their own experiences on the road. Many of them had never met Harold personally, but they knew his story. They knew what he had done. And they wanted to be there to honor him. One old-timer named Buck, who had been driving for 40 years, wiped tears from his eyes as he looked up at Harold's window. "I heard about what he did back when it happened," Buck said. "Cut that little girl free with his own pocket knife. Carried her through the fire. That's the kind of man we all want to be. That's what trucking is really about." Another driver, a young woman named Maria, who had only been on the road for 5 years, nodded in agreement. "My father was a trucker," she said. He always told me that the road was a brotherhood, that we look out for each other, and we look out for everyone else too. Harold Jenkins proved that. He showed the world what truckers are made of, but the truckers were only the beginning. Inside the hospital, Lily had gathered a different kind of army. She had reached out to every child she had ever treated at Vanderbilt, every family she had helped through a difficult time, every colleague who had been touched by her compassion and dedication. And they had come, all of them, carrying signs and flowers and cards, filling the hallways with love. The children had made their own signs, decorated with crayons and glitter and stickers. "Thank you, Mr. Harold," one read. "Heroes are real," said another. A little boy named Tommy, who Lily had treated for a broken leg 2 years earlier, held a sign that simply said, "You saved Miss Lily so she could save me." The families gathered in the hospital lobby, spilling out into the corridors and the courtyard. They shared their own stories of how Lily had helped them, how her kindness and compassion had made impossible moments bearable. And they connected those stories back to Harold, understanding that every act of kindness Lily had ever performed was rooted in the act of kindness that had saved her life. "What's happening?" Harold asked weakly, roused from sleep by the commotion outside. Lily smiled, helping him sit up slightly so he could see out the window. "They're here for you, Mr. Jenkins. All of them." Harold looked out at the parking lot, at the sea of trucks and the crowd of people, and felt his breath catch in his throat. "I don't understand," he whispered. Lily took his hand. 18 years ago, you saved my life. You gave me a chance to become who I was meant to be, and who I was meant to be is someone who helps others, just like you helped me. These people," she gestured toward the window, "they're here because of what you started. Every child I've ever comforted, every family I've ever supported, every life I've ever touched, it all began with you. You didn't just save one life that night, Mr. Jenkins. You saved hundreds, maybe thousands, and we wanted you to know." Harold stared at her, tears streaming down his face. All those people are your legacy," Lily confirmed. "Your ripple effect. One act of kindness spreading outward, touching more lives than you could ever imagine." Outside, the truckers began to sound their horns, a chorus of deep, resonant blasts that shook the windows and filled the air with sound. It was the truckers' salute, the same tribute they gave to fallen comrades on the highway, the same honor they reserved for their most respected brothers and sisters. The sound went on and on, a wall of noise that said more than words ever could. "We see you. We honor you. We remember what you did." In the hallways, the children began to sing. It was a song Lily had taught them, a simple melody about courage and kindness and the heroes who walk among us. Their voices rose and fell, pure and innocent, filling the hospital with music. Harold listened, his heart so full he thought it might burst. He had spent his whole life feeling ordinary, unremarkable, just another trucker doing a job. But in this moment, surrounded by love and gratitude and the echoes of a single act of courage, he understood that he had been so much more. "Is this real?" he asked Lily, his voice barely a whisper. "It's real," she assured him. "All of it. This is what you mean to us. This is what you mean to me." Harold's children gathered closer, their own faces wet with tears. "We're so proud of you, Dad," Sarah said. "So proud of everything you've done." Harold Jr. nodded, gripping his father's hand. "You taught us what it means to be brave," he added. "What it means to do the right thing, even when it's hard. We're going to carry that with us forever." Michael, the youngest, leaned in close. "You're a hero, Dad," he said simply. "A real hero." Harold looked at each of them, at the family he had built and the family he had found, and felt a peace settle over him like a warm blanket. "I love you all," he said, "every single one of you." The horns outside continued to blare, the children continued to sing, and the people of St. Michael's Hospital continued to bear witness to a moment that none of them would ever forget. And in the middle of it all, Lily Chen held the hand of the man who had saved her life, and she wept with gratitude. They stayed with him all day, talking and laughing and sharing stories. Harold told them about his years on the road, about the places he had seen and the people he had met. He told them about Mabel, about their courtship and their wedding and the life they had built together. He told them about his children, about the pride he felt every time he looked at them, about the joy they had brought into his world. And Lily told them about her life too, about her grandmother, who had raised her with love and patience, about her years in nursing school, struggling and studying and dreaming of the day she could help others, about the patients she had treated, the lives she had touched, the difference she had made. "We're the same, you and I," Lily told Harold as the sun began to set. "We both spend our lives helping others. We both know that the small acts of kindness are the ones that matter most." Harold nodded, his eyes growing heavy. "I'm glad," he said. "I'm glad we're the same." As evening fell, the crowd outside began to disperse, but the feeling of love and connection remained. The truckers flashed their lights one final time before pulling away, their horns silent now, but their tribute complete. The children returned to their rooms, but their song lingered in the air like a blessing. Harold's family settled in for the night, pulling chairs close to his bed, unwilling to leave his side. Lily stayed too, her hand never leaving his, her presence a comfort that transcended words. "Are you scared?" Lily asked him quietly, as the room grew dark. Harold considered the question. "No," he said finally. "I was scared before, scared that I would die without knowing if you were okay. But now that I know, now that I've seen what you've become, I'm not scared anymore. I'm ready." Lily's tears began to flow again. "I don't want you to go," she whispered. "I just found you." Harold squeezed her hand weakly. "You'll never lose me, sweetheart. I'll be with you always. Every time you comfort a scared child, every time you hold someone's hand in the dark, every time you show courage in the face of fear, I'll be right there with you. That's the thing about love, Lily. It doesn't die. It just changes form." Lily nodded, trying to smile through her tears. "I'll remember," she promised. "I'll remember everything." The night deepened, and Harold's breathing grew slower, more labored. Mabel held his other hand, whispering the same words of love she had whispered for nearly 50 years. Their children stood close, hands on his shoulders, letting him feel their presence. And Lily stayed too, keeping her promise, refusing to leave until the very end. Just after midnight, Harold opened his eyes one final time. He looked around the room, at all the faces he loved, and smiled. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for this life." Then he closed his eyes, let out a soft breath, and was gone. The silence that followed was profound, a sacred pause in which grief and gratitude mingled together. Mabel wept quietly, her head bowed over her husband's hand. The children held each other, their sorrow mixed with the knowledge that their father had died surrounded by love. And Lily stood at the bedside, looking down at the man who had given her everything, and she made a silent vow. "I will honor you," she thought. "Every day for the rest of my life I will honor you. I will be brave like you were brave. I will help like you helped. I will love like you loved. And when I'm scared or tired or ready to give up, I will hear your voice telling me it's going to be okay, and I will find the strength to keep going." She leaned down and kissed his forehead gently. "Goodbye, Mr. Jenkins," she whispered. "Thank you for stopping." The funeral was held 3 days later at a small church in Tennessee, the same church where Harold and Mabel had been married 48 years before. The building was modest, with white clapboard walls and a simple steeple that reached toward the autumn sky, but on this day it felt like a cathedral. The pews were packed with family and friends, with former colleagues and fellow truckers, with everyone whose life Harold had touched. People stood along the walls and crowded into the vestibule, unwilling to miss this final tribute to a man who had meant so much to so many. Outside, the parking lot overflowed with trucks. Drivers who could not fit inside sat in their cabs, listening to the service through speakers that had been set up for the overflow crowd. Some had driven hundreds of miles to be there. Others had crossed the entire country, All of them wanted to pay their respects to a brother who had embodied everything their profession stood for. The church was filled with flowers, arrangements sent from trucking companies and hospitals, and individuals from all over America. Ribbons in the colors of the highway, gray and yellow and white, adorned the pews. And at the front of the church, next to the simple wooden casket, was a photograph of Harold in his younger days, standing proudly beside his first truck, a smile on his face and hope in his eyes. And in the front row, sitting with the family as if she had always belonged there, was Lily Chen. She had been asked to speak, and when her turn came, she walked to the podium on trembling legs, carrying a piece of paper on which she had written her thoughts. But when she looked out at the congregation, at all the faces watching her with expectation and love, she set the paper aside. 18 years ago, she began, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. I was trapped in a burning car. My mother was already gone, and I thought I was going to die too. I was 5 years old, and I had given up hope. And then, out of nowhere, a man appeared. He crawled through broken glass to reach me. He cut me free with his pocket knife. He carried me to safety, shielding me with his own body when the car exploded. He saved my life. She paused, looking at the casket at the front of the church. For 18 years I didn't know his name. I didn't know where he lived or what he did or if he was even still alive. All I knew was his voice telling me it was going to be okay. That voice became my anchor, my strength. My reason to keep going when everything seemed impossible. When I finally found Harold Jenkins, he was dying. He had weeks to live, maybe less, and his only wish, his dying wish, was to see the little girl he had saved. Not for thanks, not for recognition, just to know that she was okay, that the sacrifice had been worth it. Lily's voice broke and she had to pause to compose herself. I want you all to know that it was worth it. Every moment of Harold's life, every mile he drove, every storm he weathered, it all led to that night on the highway. The night he chose to stop when everyone else would have kept driving. The night he risked everything to save a stranger. Because of Harold Jenkins, I am alive. Because of him, I became a nurse. Because of him, I have helped hundreds of children and families. And because of him, I understand what it truly means to be brave. She turned to face the casket, her hand reaching out as if to touch him one last time. Harold, she said softly, I promise to carry your legacy forward. I promise to stop when I see someone in need. I promise to run toward danger instead of away from it. I promise to be the kind of person you believed I could be. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for showing me what it means to be a hero. She stepped back from the podium, and the church was silent for a long moment. Then, from somewhere in the back, a trucker began to clap. Others joined in, slowly at first, then building to a thunderous ovation that shook the rafters and filled the air with sound. It was a standing ovation for a man who had spent his life sitting behind a wheel, a tribute to a hero who had never sought glory, a farewell to a friend who would never be forgotten. After the service, as the crowd spilled out into the autumn sunshine, Lily found herself standing next to Mabel at Harold's graveside. He loved you, you know, Mabel said, her voice soft but steady. From the moment he pulled you from that car, he loved you like his own. Lily nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. I know. I felt it. Even before I knew his name, I felt his love. Mabel took her hand. Your family now, Lily. Whatever you need, wherever you go, you have a family here. That's what Harold would have wanted. Lily embraced her, holding on tight. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for sharing him with me. They stood together at the grave, two women connected by love and loss and the mysterious ways that lives intersected and influenced each other. And as the autumn leaves fell around them, painting the ground in shades of gold and orange, they both felt something shift in the air, something that felt like peace, something that felt like hope. In the weeks that followed, Lily returned to her work at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital with renewed purpose. She treated every patient with extra care, every family with extra compassion, knowing that she was honoring Harold with every act of kindness. She stayed in touch with Mabel and the Jenkins children, calling regularly, visiting when she could. They had become her family now, just as Mabel had promised, and she treasured the connection more than she could say. And she told Harold's story again and again to anyone who would listen. She told it to her colleagues and her patients, to strangers on the street and friends at dinner parties. She wanted the world to know about the trucker who had stopped, who had risked everything, who had changed her life with a single act of courage. Because that was the thing about heroes, Lily realized. They didn't always wear capes or save the world. Sometimes they drove trucks and hauled freight and lived quiet lives in small towns. Sometimes they were ordinary people who, in a single moment, chose to be extraordinary. Harold Jenkins had been that kind of hero, and because of him, Lily would spend the rest of her life trying to be the same. 1 year after Harold's death, Lily organized a special event at the hospital. She called it the Harold Jenkins Day of Courage, and she invited everyone who had been touched by his story to participate. The response was overwhelming. Truckers came from across the country, their rigs decorated with banners bearing Harold's name. Children made cards and drew pictures, their artwork filling the hospital walls with color and joy. Families shared stories of how Lily's care had helped them through difficult times, tracing the thread of kindness back to its source. And at the center of it all was a simple ceremony held in the hospital chapel, where Lily unveiled a plaque that would hang outside the pediatric ward for generations to come. In memory of Harold Jenkins, the plaque read, "A trucker, a hero, a man who stopped." Mabel was there for the unveiling, her eyes bright with tears. "He would have hated this," she said with a laugh, "all this attention. He always said he was just doing his job." Lily smiled. "Maybe, but he deserves it anyway." The ceremony was beautiful, filled with music and speeches, and the kind of heartfelt emotion that came from genuine love. But the most powerful moment came at the end, when a little girl stepped forward to speak. Her name was Emma, and she was 7 years old. 6 months earlier, she'd been brought to the hospital with a serious illness, her parents terrified, and her future uncertain. Lily had been her nurse, staying with her through the long nights, holding her hand when she was scared, telling her stories to help her sleep. "Miss Lily saved me," Emma said, her small voice echoing through the chapel. "She was so nice and so brave. She told me about Mr. Harold and how he saved her when she was little, like me. She said that we're all connected and that when someone helps us, we have to help someone else." The little girl looked at Lily, her eyes shining. "I want to be like you, Miss Lily. I want to help people too, just like you and Mr. Harold." Lily felt her heart swell with emotion. She walked to where Emma stood and knelt down, taking the little girl's hands in her own. "You will, sweetheart," she said. "You already are. And somewhere Mr. Harold is watching you, and he's so proud." Emma smiled and hugged her, and the chapel erupted in applause. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed and the day wound down, Lily found a quiet moment to slip away. She walked through the hospital corridors, past the wards and the waiting rooms, until she reached the small garden at the center of the building. She sat on a bench beneath an old oak tree and looked up at the sky, watching the clouds drift by. She thought about Harold, about the night he had saved her, about the year since his death. She thought about all the lives he had touched, all the ripples his courage had created, all the ways his legacy continued to grow. And she thought about her own life, about the path that had led her here, about the purpose she had found in helping others. She was not the same person she had been a year ago. She was stronger, wiser, more certain of who she was and what she was meant to do. "Thank you, Harold," she whispered to the sky. "Thank you for everything." A breeze rustled the leaves of the oak tree, and Lily felt a warmth settle over her, as if someone unseen was wrapping her in a gentle embrace. She closed her eyes and smiled, feeling at peace for the first time in a long while. She did not know what the future held, what challenges she would face, or what joys she would experience. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would never stop. She would never give up. She would never forget the man who had shown her what it meant to be brave. And every day, for the rest of her life, she would honor his memory by doing exactly what he had done on that rainy night 18 years ago. She would stop. She would help. She would save. Because that was the legacy of Harold Jenkins, not just a life saved, but a life transformed. Not just a moment of courage, but a lifetime of kindness. Not just one hero, but a chain of heroes, stretching forward into the future, each one inspired by the one who came before. Lily stood up from the bench and walked back toward the hospital, toward the patients who needed her, toward the work that gave her life meaning. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange and pink. It was beautiful, she thought. Beautiful and hopeful and full of promise. Just like the life Harold Jenkins had given her, just like the life she was determined to live. She pushed through the hospital doors and stepped into the light, ready for whatever came next. And somewhere, in a place beyond sight, but not beyond feeling, Harold Jenkins watched her go, his heart full of pride. His little girl had grown up, and she was everything he had hoped she would be. The story of Harold Jenkins and Lily Chen did not end there. In the years that followed, it continued to grow and spread, touching more lives than either of them could have imagined. Mabel lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, by the extended family that Lily had become a part of. She passed peacefully in her sleep, and at her funeral, Lily spoke again, honoring the woman who had loved Harold for nearly 50 years. The Jenkins children continued their father's legacy in their own ways. Harold Jr. became a volunteer firefighter. Sarah started a non-profit that provided support to families affected by traffic accidents. Michael, the youngest, became a truck driver himself, following in his father's footsteps and carrying his memory down every highway in America. And Lily continued her work at the hospital, rising through the ranks until she became the head of the pediatric department. She was known for her compassion, her dedication, and her ability to connect with even the most frightened child. Parents trusted her implicitly, colleagues respected her deeply, and children adored her. But her greatest achievement was not any title or award. It was the tradition she had started, the Harold Jenkins Day of Courage, which had grown from a small hospital event into a national movement. Every year, on the anniversary of Harold's death, truckers across America would gather at their local hospitals to honor healthcare workers. They would bring flowers and gifts, tell stories of their own acts of courage, and remind everyone that heroes came in all shapes and sizes. The event raised money for pediatric wards, supported families in crisis, and celebrated the ordinary people who did extraordinary things. And at the center of it all was the same simple message: stop, help, save. 3 words that had changed Lily's life. 3 words that continued to change the world. On the 20th anniversary of Harold's rescue, Lily returned to the stretch of highway outside Memphis, where it had all begun. She stood at the exact spot where the minivan had crashed, where the fire had burned, where a trucker had crawled through broken glass to save a little girl. The highway looked different now, widened and improved, the guardrail replaced, and the median landscaped. But the memories remained, vivid and clear, as if no time had passed at all. Lily closed her eyes and let herself remember. The rain, the fire, the fear, and then the voice, cutting through the chaos, telling her it was going to be okay. She opened her eyes and smiled. It was okay. It was more than okay. It was beautiful. She pulled a small object from her pocket, a worn photograph of Harold that she had carried with her since his funeral. She looked at his face, at the kind eyes and gentle smile, and felt her heart swell with love. "I did it, Harold," she whispered. "I kept my promise. I honored your legacy. I stopped and helped and saved, just like you taught me." A truck passed on the highway behind her, its horn sounding a single, resonant blast. Lily turned to watch it go, feeling the familiar rumble in her chest, the echo of a life spent on the road. She raised her hand in a wave, a tribute to all the truckers everywhere who kept the world moving. The driver inside, a young man she had never met, saw her standing there and understood. He slowed his truck, brought his hand to his heart in a salute, and then pressed on, carrying his cargo to wherever it needed to go. That was what Harold would have wanted, Lily thought. Not mourning, but movement. Not grief, but gratitude. Not an ending, but a continuation. She took one last look at the highway, at the place where her life had been saved and her purpose had been forged. And then she turned and walked back to her car, ready to continue her own journey. The road stretched before her, endless and full of possibility. The autumn sun was warm on her face, and the wind carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant places. She thought about all the roads she had yet to travel, all the people she had yet to help, all the lives she had yet to touch, and somewhere, on the highways and byways of America, the spirit of Harold Jenkins traveled with her. A guardian angel in a trucker's cap, watching over her always. Can you protect me? Yes, always, forever. And that was the greatest gift of all. The story of Harold Jenkins and Lily Chen did not end there. In the years that followed, it continued to grow and spread, touching more lives than either of them could have imagined. Mabel lived another 5 years after Harold's passing, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, by the extended family that Lily had become a part of. She passed peacefully in her sleep, and at her funeral, Lily spoke again, honoring the woman who had loved Harold for nearly 50 years. The Jenkins children continued their father's legacy in their own ways. Harold Jr. became a volunteer firefighter. Sarah started a non-profit that provided support to families affected by traffic accidents. Michael, the youngest, became a truck driver himself, following in his father's footsteps and carrying his memory down every highway in America. And Lily continued her work at the hospital, rising through the ranks until she became the head of the pediatric department. She was known for her compassion, her dedication, and her ability to connect with even the most frightened child. Parents trusted her implicitly, colleagues respected her deeply, and children adored her. She married a good man, a fellow healthcare worker she met at a conference, and they had 2 children of their own, a boy named Harold, in honor of the trucker who had saved her, and a girl named Jennifer, in honor of the mother she had lost. They lived in a cozy house outside Nashville, not far from the grandmother who had raised Lily, and they built a life filled with love and laughter and purpose. Her grandmother passed away when Lily was 35, having lived long enough to see her granddaughter become everything she had hoped she would be. On her deathbed, she had taken Lily's hand and smiled. "You made it," the old woman had whispered. "You took all that pain and turned it into something beautiful. Your mother would be so proud." Lily had wept, holding her grandmother's hand until the very end. And then she had stood up, dried her tears, and returned to work. Because that was what Harold Jenkins had taught her. You did not stop. You did not give up. You kept going, kept helping, kept saving, one person at a time. Every night before her children went to sleep, Lily would tell them the story of the trucker and the highway. She would describe the rain and the fire, the fear and the courage, the moment when a stranger became a hero. And she would remind them that kindness mattered, that stopping to help someone in need was the most important thing a person could do. Remember, she would tell them, we are all connected. When someone helps us, we have to help someone else. That is how the world gets better, one act of kindness at a time. The children would listen, their eyes wide with wonder, and they would promise to be brave, to be kind, to be the kind of people who stopped instead of driving by. And Lily would kiss them goodnight, turn off the light, and stand for a moment in the doorway, watching them drift off to sleep. She would think of Harold Jenkins, of his weathered face and gentle voice, of the way he had held her in the rain and told her everything was going to be okay, and she would smile, knowing that his legacy lived on, in her children, in every person she had ever helped, in every life she had ever touched. The highway stretched on forever, an endless ribbon of possibility connecting past to present to future. And on that highway, traveling through the night with stars overhead and hope in his heart, the spirit of Harold Jenkins continued his eternal journey. Not alone, never alone. Accompanied by everyone he had ever saved, everyone he had ever loved, everyone who had ever been touched by his simple act of courage on a rainy night in Tennessee. Can you protect me? Yes, always, forever. And in that promise, repeated across generations and carried on the wind, was everything that truly mattered. Connection, kindness, love, the things that made us human. The things that made life worth living, the things that Harold Jenkins had given to a scared little girl in a burning car, and that she had spent her entire life giving back to the world. The story had no ending, because love never ends. It just keeps spreading, rippling outward, touching more lives with each passing day. That was the gift of Harold Jenkins. That was the gift of Lily Chen. That was the gift that belonged to all of us, if only we had the courage to accept it. Stop, help, save. 3 words that changed everything. 3 words that would change everything, again and again, for as long as there were people willing to speak them. And there always would be, because that was what heroes did. They stopped, they helped, they saved, and in doing so, they saved themselves. Just like Harold Jenkins, just like Lily Chen, just like all of us in our own small ways, every single day, the road calls to us all. The question is whether we will answer. Can you protect me? The answer was always yes. It had always been yes, and it would always be yes. Forever. The end.